Hi, I'm Lisa Jordan. I'm Executive Director and Counsel at the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and you're here for our 2024 update on legislation that helps survivors of sexual violence. The Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault is the state sexual assault coalition. We represent all of the rape crisis centers across the state, and we have members who are people who are like you. Please join us. If you want to reach me, my email is on the screen, lcjordan@mcasa.org. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions about what's being presented or if you have ideas for legislation that will help survivors and the programs that serve them. Today, we're going to be talking about legislation that passed the state legislature in 2024. So this is Annapolis, not the DC legislature. And we will update you on the wonderful things that happened. The first thing that happened is we worked on funding for victim services, making sure that we have funding to help rape crisis centers and to help sexual assault survivors is one of MCASA's key missions. This year, we saw the implementation of the Victim Services Stabilization Act that passed in 2023 that helps to stabilize federal VOCA money. We had a return to monthly reimbursements for nonprofit grant recipients. This was a major issue for people who have grants from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. We received some continued general funds for rape crisis centers, and there was also funding for rape kit testing. Moving on to policy bills, the biggest bill to talk about is the bill on consent. This was House Bill 496, Senate Bill 758, and this really changed rape law in Maryland. First of all, it eliminates the requirement that a victim prove resistance. This was a harmful part of our statute that really flipped the burden of proof onto survivors. And instead, we're making sure that consent means there's a clear and voluntary agreement, that consent or lack of consent can be both by words or by conduct. So this is not affirmative consent. This is an adult bill for adult situations. There's some specifics. Consent is not a current or previous dating or social or sexual relationship. Consent is not how you dress. And consent is not submission as a result of fear or threat or coercion. Documentation of consent is not required. Thank you especially to Delegate Emily Shetty, the amazing House sponsor, and to former Senator Ariana Kelly. We had a couple of bills that affected rape kits. So these are sexual assault evidence kits. The Maryland General Assembly passed a do-it-yourself kit ban. There was an effort by a for-profit commercial entity that wanted to sell survivors kits that they said they could do at home and then somehow protect their rights in the future. The legislature recognized that really this was an exploitation of survivors. It risked misleading survivors. And it said not only are these commercial kits banned, but also the commercial entity was trying to make it so that if survivors use the kits, they were waiving their right to sue the company. And so that was also eliminated. Also, in the area of rape kits, we had major progress in authorizing peer-to-peer telehealth for rape kits. So this will permit a forensic nurse, an expert who's in one location, to provide peer support to a health professional who is with the survivor in another location. Maryland continues to see real barriers to access to sexual assault forensic exams, and this has the potential to truly expand access so someone can show up at different locations, whether it's an emergency room that doesn't have a safe program, or perhaps even a women's clinic or a college campus. There's lots of potential here, and this is the first step in authorizing peer-to-peer telehealth for safe exams. The Maryland General Assembly passed a bill to expand sexual solicitation of a minor as a law. And so we just had a quirk in the law where you could not threaten or extort a child to produce child pornography, but you could persuade the child and it wouldn't fall under the same laws, wouldn't have the same penalties. So this added solicitation of child pornography to the current sexual solicitation of a minor law. Importantly, this will also allow law enforcement to pose as a child and help do stings to find predators. We improve the law on indecent exposure in the sight of a minor. So this is only indecent exposure with prurient intent. So this is not someone who, is inadvertently exposing themselves. This is someone who is really trying to gain sexual gratification by exposing themselves to minors. This increases the penalty both in terms of years and in terms of fine, and it will make it so if someone has a security clearance, that this is something that will be considered. The perpetrator has to know or reasonably should know that the minor is present. Nobody needs to have a crystal ball. We had some major improvements in the time to prosecute, three laws, all that involve cell phones and the internet and computers. They're not always, but frequently online. Stalking, prosecutors will now have 10 years to prosecute. So-called revenge porn, which is by its nature, something that's electronic, will have no statute of limitations because often an image is posted of someone without their consent and they don't know about it for years. So this gives prosecutors the time to prosecute after the survivor discovers what's going on. And then for sextortion, there will be 5 years to prosecute that crime. Diminution credits have changed for people who are convicted of first-degree rape. This is named for Pava Marie Lapierre. She was murdered by a sex offender in Baltimore City, and that offender was released because he earned DIM credits. The law won't bring her back, but it will help by preventing this from happening again by saying first-degree sex offenders do not earn diminution credits. We're going to be protecting the identity of minors, not only in sex crimes, but we're going to protect identifying information about minors. It won't be included in public records of either criminal or juvenile proceedings. Thank you to Delegate Phillips and Senator Sidner for this important bill. The Kids Code passed. So this is a fairly technical bill. It's really designed to get at children who are using the internet and how we need to protect them. So what it does is it instructs businesses, and it says, if you are designing an online service, a product, features that are reasonably likely to be accessed by kids, you have to have some privacy protection for those kids. Now, this is part of a nationwide effort to improve our protections for children who use computers. And there are court challenges that have been filed in other states. And so we're waiting to see what happens with those court cases. But we are very hopeful that this will be a major improvement to children and their safety. A bill was passed about crime classification. Many states have things like a first-degree felony and a second-degree felony. Maryland doesn't. It's either a misdemeanor or it's a felony. There's not much nuance within those labels. And so a task force was established, and they're going to look at whether we should do that in Maryland as well. Abortion access is incredibly important for rape survivors. 5% of survivors of reproductive age become pregnant as a result of rape. Almost 3 million women in the US have experienced rape-related pregnancies. In Maryland, there was a constitutional amendment. It was adopted by the voters. This was question 1, and this establishes reproductive rights in the Maryland Constitution. In 2023, a bill passed and it expanded the statute of limitations for child sex abuse civil lawsuits. So these are survivors who are suing the people, the institutions that either caused or allowed their abuse to happen. That's being challenged at the Maryland Supreme Court. When this is being recorded, that Supreme Court decision is still pending. Now, those are things that happened last session in 2024 and some updates on recently passed bills. Let's move on to next session for the 2025 session. The first thing to know is that Maryland is facing a budget crisis. There is an enormous structural deficit that's looming, and so everyone is looking at different ways that we can respond to the crisis. We are, of course, at MCASA devoted to protecting rape crisis centers, not only from the budget crisis at the state level, but also because the COVID money was really helping rape crisis centers, and some of that money is going away as well. So we have a lot to deal with on the finance side of things. On the policy side, we have a bill called Stop Silencing Survivors, and this will help prevent litigation from being used as a weapon to silence survivors. All across America, we see a trend of assailants suing survivors after the survivor discloses sexual assault. Many of these cases allege defamation, but others include things like intentional infliction of emotional distress or malicious prosecution. And so we don't want to eliminate the ability to sue, but we do want to raise the bar a bit because sexual assault is already the most underreported crime. And these lawsuits are really discouraging what reporting is being done. Sarah Love and Vice Chair Sandy Bartlett will be sponsoring this bill. In Maryland, everyone has to consent before they are recorded on audio. So you record somebody on your cell phone, everybody involved, as long as they're in a private area, they have to provide consent. Several survivors have taped their rape, and not only is that evidence inadmissible, it also makes the survivor a felon because she didn't ask the rapist whether or not the crime could be taped. The bill is going to be introduced to try to balance privacy and admissibility concerns. This year, the legislature is going to take a new approach and try to make it so the judge really considers each case and the merits of whether the audio recording should be admitted. We expect to see several bills on the issue of deep fakes. And that's, of course, the practice of placing someone's image on the internet, and it's not their actual image. It's perhaps an altered picture or maybe using their face on someone else's body. MCASA is very concerned that we have not only criminal options for survivors, but also civil options, the option for injunctive relief to try to remove those deep fakes from the internet, and also attorney's fees, because if we don't provide for attorney's fees, survivors aren't really going to have access to court. For more information about these bills and other bills that are coming up in 2025, please visit our website. Please sign up for our alerts. It's so important when you reach out and you talk to your legislators and tell them that you care about issues of sexual violence and that you support the bills that MCASA is advocating for, or that you oppose the bills that we object to. As always, it is vital that you speak up, that you speak out. Thank you for being so concerned about survivors of sexual violence, and thank you for all that you do.